You have believed in the myth of the difference in styles all your life. But as soon as you get hold of Zakharov's table, the chronology begins to crack. The same event exists under several dates and in different eras at once. Who benefited from the same real era being spread out on paper into antiquity, the Middle Ages, and modern times? How did it happen that shifting the scale by just a few days or years causes an entire state to disappear from the convenient version of the textbook? Why is the Western European calendar suddenly introduced in a divided country by decree, which orders to count February 14th immediately after January 31? The main question is, if they managed to steal 13 days, then how many years and events have they actually taken from us along with them? Every year on January 13th, you celebrate something that does not exist. The Old New Year. A strange holiday that hangs between dates. The table is set a second time. Toasts are repeated. It is explained by the Bolsheviks' calendar reform. They removed 13 days, so there ended up being 2 holidays. But if you stop and think, questions arise. Why does no other country in the world celebrate the old year anymore? The French do not celebrate. The Germans do not celebrate. The English, Italians, Spaniards, no one. Only the former Soviet Union, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus. The rest of the world lives by one calendar. They celebrate on December 31st, and that's it. But we return to the table on January 13th, as if something was left unfinished, not fully celebrated. What was so special about the Russian calendar that it was necessary to cut out 2 weeks from it? In January of 1918, the Council of People's Commissars issued a decree. The country was in the chaos of civil war, famine, devastation. The old empire was collapsing. The new government was just being established. And among the decrees on nationalization, land, and peace, a document about the calendar appeared. Signed by Chairman Vladimir Ulyanov, known as Lenin. The wording is curious if read carefully. On the introduction of the Western European calendar in the Russian Republic, not the Gregorian, not new, not modern, specifically Western European, as if emphasizing, we are adopting a foreign system. We are abandoning our own and switching to theirs. The mechanism is described clearly. After January 31st, February 14th will immediately follow. 13 days will simply disappear. They will not exist. The 1st, 2nd, 3rd of February, the 12th, 13th, will not come. Time will jump over these dates as if over an abyss. The official explanation sounds reasonable. The difference between the Julian and Gregorian calendars was removed. Russia lagged behind Europe. It was necessary to synchronize, to join the civilized world. But if you dig deeper, 13 days are not just numbers, not a mathematical error accumulated over centuries. These are 13 days of history that ceased to exist. Events, documents, orders, births, deaths. Everything that fell into this period was officially erased, rewritten, redated. And to understand what exactly these vanished days are hiding, you need to look at who and when changed the calendars in the rest of Europe. Here begins the absurd. European countries switched to the new calendar not all at once, but in 2 waves. The first wave was from 1582 to 1587. The Vatican, Spain, Portugal, Poland in 1582. Austria and southern Germany in 1583. Czechia, Switzerland, Hungary followed. A mass transition of Catholic countries. Then silence. A whole century. Nothing happens. And suddenly the second wave. From 1700 to 1753. Protestant lands of Germany, parts of Holland. Great Britain in 1752. Sweden in 1753. More than 100 years between the waves. Imagine the absurdity of the situation. Austria switched to the new calendar in the year 1583. Its neighbor, Prussia, only in 1700. The difference is 117 years. How did they conduct trade? A merchant from Vienna arrives in Berlin with goods. He agrees on a delivery for the 15th of March. The 15th of March according to which calendar? The Viennese. The Berlin one. They have different dates. The difference is 10 to 11 days. Sometimes even a month is shifted. Imagine diplomatic negotiations. The Austrian ambassador arranges a meeting with the Prussian chancellor. The documents are dated differently. Letters arrive with dates from the future or the past, depending on where they were sent from. How can military operations be coordinated at all if the Allies have different calendars? The order: attack on the 21st. The 21st according to whose count? Banking, promissory notes, loan interest. Everything is tied to dates. A promissory note is issued for 3 months. But 3 months according to which system? How to calculate interest if the very concept of a month is different? The economy cannot function in conditions of temporal chaos. This is not the logic of the market. This is the logic of war. When different counting systems are needed to confuse, hide, rewrite. Take Sweden. There was real madness there. The Swedes decided to act smartly, to transition smoothly, without sharp jumps. From 1700 to 1740, they planned to gradually remove leap days. 11 extra days to be excluded over 40 years, 2 to 3 days per decade. It seemed logical, but they got off track from the very beginning. The year 1700 was not supposed to be a leap year according to the plan. They did it correctly, but in 1704, a mistake. They added an extra day when they should not have. In 1708, again, they lost synchronization with both the Julian and Gregorian calendars. Sweden ended up in a unique time pit. Their calendar did not match any in the world. They decided to go back to the old Julian calendar. But to return, it was necessary to compensate for the extra day that had been added. And in 1712, they did the incredible. The year became a double leap year. To the usual 29th of February, they added one more day. In February of the year 1712, there were 30 days. Not a myth, not a fabrication, a historical fact recorded in Swedish church records. 30 days in the shortest month of the year. People lived, celebrated, married, and gave birth on a date that did not exist anywhere else on the planet. The 30th of February, 1712. Try to find this date in any other calendar in the world. And only in 1753 did Sweden finally switch to the Gregorian calendar. They skipped 11 days at once, like all normal countries. Half a century of chaos for what? How can trade, diplomacy, cultural exchange exist when neighbors live in different times? Either there was no trade, or there were many more calendars, and they did not mean counting systems, but different versions of history. And here, Peter I appears with his reform. And here, the logic completely collapses. The year 1700. Peter changes the calendar. Before that, Russia lived by the Byzantine era, 7208th year from the creation of the world. After the reform, 1700 from the birth of Christ. The official version states, Peter switched to the Julian calendar. But in the year 1700, all of Europe is already switching to the Gregorian calendar. Even the Protestants, who hated Rome and all things papal, adopt the Gregorian calendar. And Peter, the great reformer, who breaks a window to Europe, builds a fleet, changes the army, introduces Western customs, chooses the outdated Julian calendar, the one that everyone is abandoning. It's like introducing rotary phones in the era of smartphones. Logic collapses. The only explanation: historians lied. Peter switched immediately to the Gregorian calendar in the year 1700. But then the question arises, where did the 13-day difference come from in 1918, which the Bolsheviks corrected? The answer is simple and terrible. There was no difference. These 13 days are not a calendar error. These are 13 days of events cut out from history. And to understand the scale of the substitution, a system is needed. Such a system exists. Researcher Konstantin Zakharov created a consolidated table of calendars that overturns the understanding of chronology. It turns out that there were not 2 calendars, old and new. There were at least 5 systems existing simultaneously. The first, is the modern chronological scale, the system by which we live now. The second is the Old Catholic system. It was used in Southern Europe. It is also called the Old French system. The third is Old Dutch, Northern Europe, Baltic region. The fourth is Napoleon's calendar, introduced in France after the Reform. Fifth, the calendar of Peter I, Russia from the year 1700 to 1918. 5 systems, 5 different ways to count time. And here is what makes Zakharov's table shocking. It shows how the same event is recorded in 5 different points in history. Let's take the central point of reference, the flood. A global catastrophe, traces of which are visible everywhere. According to the modern chronological scale, it is the year 1836. According to the Old Catholic system, 1581. The difference is 255 years. According to the Old Dutch, 1736. The difference is 100 years. According to Napoleon's calendar, 1781. The difference is 55 years. According to Peter's calendar, 1681. The difference is 155 years. One event, 5 dates in different history textbooks. Do you understand what this means? Imagine, some important event happened. A battle, a disaster, the coronation of a king. It was recorded in a document. The date was indicated according to the system in use at that time. 100 years later, the calendar changes. The document is rewritten. The date is recalculated. But a different formula is used for the recalculation. A new date appears, shifted by 50, 100, 200 years. Historians find both documents. They do not understand that it is one event. They record it as 2 different ones. 2 battles instead of 1 get into the textbook. 2 kings instead of 1. 2 floods instead of a single catastrophe. 1 historical period multiplies. Events of 50 real years turn into 300 years of history. You take a document dated according to Napoleon's calendar. You rewrite the date into the modern chronological scale. You add 55 years. It results in a completely new event on the timeline. Although it is the same, just recalculated. The technology of falsification is simple to the point of genius. It is not necessary to destroy all documents. It is enough to change the way they are read. The dates remain, but their interpretation changes, and the past is rebuilt like a constructor. And here arises a direct connection with Tartaria, that empire, whose traces were erased from maps in the 19th century, existed in a single time. It had a unified system of chronology, one calendar from the Urals to Europe, from Siberia to the Mediterranean, a single time for a unified civilization. When Tartary was physically destroyed, cities demolished, libraries burned, population wiped out, the task arose to destroy it chronologically. You cannot simply leave a 300-year gap. People will start asking questions. Where did the empire go? Where are the documents? Where are the traces of trade, diplomacy, culture? It was necessary to fill the void. And the creators of the new story acted brilliantly. They did not invent the past from scratch. They took fragments of the real recent past and stretched it back through the centuries. One historical period lasting 50 to 100 years was duplicated 5 times. It resulted in 500 years of ancient history. The events that took place in Tartary in the 17th, 18th centuries turned into antiquity, the Middle Ages, modern times. The same wars are recorded under different names in different centuries. The same rulers became 3 or 4 historical figures. The same buildings were given different ages depending on which calendar was used to date them. Tartaria disappeared not only from the face of the earth, it disappeared from time. It was chronologically fragmented, split into 5 versions, each of which describes a piece of the truth. But putting it back together without Zakharov's table is impossible. But how exactly was this done? How were the dates technically substituted? The key is in the strange French numeral system that was destroyed at the beginning of the 19th century. Before Napoleon's reform in France, dates looked unusual. I-593, I-601, I-612, not 1593rd as in other countries, but specifically the letter I plus the number. A strange system which official history explains as a French peculiarity, local tradition, an abbreviation of unknown origin. In fact, this is a symbol of the era, a symbol of another world. The letter I marked the beginning of the count from an event that was not the birth of Christ, from some other point in the past, from a moment that was more important to the people of that time than the birth of Christ. Take Victor Hugo's novel 93, a classic of French literature. It describes the uprising in the Vendée, one of the bloodiest episodes of the French Revolution. Peasants against republicans. According to the old system, it is the year 1593. After Napoleon's reform, it became 1793. How did this happen? Napoleon simply added 1,000 years. He took the I-593rd, removed the letter I, put a 1 with zeros in front. It became 1593rd. Then he shifted it another 200 years. It became 1793rd. Mathematically simple. Historically, a disaster. One event received 3 different dates depending on the counting system. The uprising in the Vendée exists in the year 1593rd, in 1593rd, and in 1793rd. 3 records in different documents, 3 dates in different chronicles. A historian unaware of this substitution will conclude that there were 3 different uprisings. But the main question remains, from what was the I counted? What event was the starting point for the entire old French system? The version becomes obvious if you look at the maps. From the moment of the founding of the last world empire, the very one that on the maps of the 17th-18th centuries was marked as Grand Tartaria, a gigantic territory from the Urals to Central Europe, from Siberia to the Mediterranean. An empire that began to be forgotten in the 19th century, and in the 20th century was forgotten completely. Europe before Napoleon lived according to the calendar of this empire. The letter I is a memory of another time, a time when there was a different order, a different power, a different civilization. Napoleon erased this letter, replacing it with the unit familiar to us, 1000. Thus, the last visible trace of a unified chronology, which connected peoples not with Rome and Christianity, but with something more ancient and more global, was destroyed. Look at the maps. On the maps of the 16th, 17th centuries, the huge Grand Tartary occupies half a continent. In the 18th century, it begins to break into pieces. In the 19th, it disappears completely. At the same time, calendars also break apart and multiply. The unified time of Tartary turns into 5 different counting systems. The destruction of the empire equals the destruction of its time. But Napoleon was not just making a calendar reform. He was creating a coordinate system for a new world, a complete system of control over space and time. The project consisted of 3 interconnected elements, each complementing the others. The first is the metric system of measurements. Before Napoleon, each province of France had its own measures. The Paris foot differed from the Lyon foot. The livre in Normandy did not weigh the same as the livre in Brittany. Trade turned into a nightmare. It was necessary to know hundreds of local measures, constantly recalculating. Napoleon introduces a universal standard. The meter is 1/40,000,000th part of the Earth's circumference. The kilogram is the weight of 1 liter of water. The liter is a cubic decimeter. Everything is tied to physical constants. It cannot be forged. It cannot be distorted by local customs. The goal is obvious: to make the world measurable and controllable. If everyone measures the same way, it can be managed from the center. Orders, norms, and standards are spread without distortion. The metric system is the language of power, understood by all subordinates. Second, the Paris meridian as 0, the reference point for geographic coordinates. Until 1884, There was a struggle between Paris and Greenwich. Napoleon promoted Paris as the center of the world. All maps had to be measured from the Paris Observatory. Who controls the prime meridian controls the maps. Who controls the maps controls the territories, determines the borders, names the lands, decides what exists and what does not. On maps with the Paris meridian, Tartary looked one way. On maps with the Greenwich meridian, another. Then it disappeared completely. Third, the calendar as a global chronology, a shift of 200 years. The year 1600 becomes 1800. The goal, to synchronize all countries to one system, to erase the memory of the previous era when the world lived by a different time, by the time of Tartary. Why shift by 200 years exactly, and not by 100? Because two systems existed simultaneously in Europe. The old French system, I-600, I-601. The old Dutch system, 1755, 1756. If you shift by only 100, you get duplicate dates. Dutch 1756 plus 100 equals 1856. Too late. French I-601 plus 100 equals 1701. And that is already taken by Peter. Solution: a shift of 200 years. The Dutch 1756 turns into 1801. The French I-601 also becomes 1801. Both systems merged into one date without conflicts. Napoleon created a pure chronology, but he was defeated in 1815 according to his calendar, which corresponds to the year 1870 on the modern scale. Who defeated him? England, Russia, Holland. Those who did not want a unified system, because a unified system means unified power, and they needed chaos of calendars for manipulations. And after the defeat of Napoleon, the second wave of the calendar war began. The British one, even more sophisticated, even more global. Britain did not abandon Napoleon's idea. Why reinvent the wheel when you can steal an existing design and improve it? They created their own calendar system based on an old Dutch tradition, but with a critical difference. The shift was not 200 years, as with Napoleon, but 100. Why exactly 100? The logic is simple and cynical. By that time, the French system with the letter I was already destroyed. Napoleon erased it. Only Dutch-type dates remained: 1755, 1756. There is no need to worry about duplication anymore. You can shift more easily. 1776 in the old Dutch system turns into 1876 in the new British system. Exactly 100 years difference. Elegant, simple, effective. The period of mass transition stretched from 1890 to 1900, the decade when country after country abandoned their local calendars and adopted the British standard. Germany, Austria, Hungary, the Balkan states, Latin American countries. Even Russia formally existed in this system through diplomacy and trade, although internally it retained Peter's calendar until 1918. By the year 1900, the entire civilized world lives according to British chronology. The Paris meridian was finally displaced by the Greenwich meridian in 1884. Napoleon's metric system was adopted, but control over its application and standardization passed into the hands of British and American institutions. The calendar was fully standardized, but the technical details are not more important. What is more important is what happens alongside the calendar unification. From 1890 to 1900, the official history of humanity is created. Textbooks are written, historical societies are founded, university departments are opened, and they all work according to the same chronological tables. All previous calendar systems are erased from collective memory. The old French system with the letter I is completely forgotten. The Napoleon calendar is remembered only as the French Republican calendar, a strange revolutionary invention that quickly failed. The multiplicity of counting systems is not mentioned at all. The events of the last 300 years are being rewritten from scratch. Old documents are either destroyed or translated into a new dating. Moreover, the translation is done selectively. What is convenient for the new authorities is preserved. What is inconvenient is lost in archival fires and revolutionary unrest. History before 1900 ceases to be reality. It becomes a construct, a set of approved dates between which causal connections are stretched. A beautiful fairy tale for schoolchildren, a convenient scheme for politicians, and an absolute lie for those who try to understand. By 1900, the very word Tartary disappears from maps. The last mentions are in the 1850s. After that, only Mongolia, Manchuria, Siberia. The unified empire was broken into pieces, and its time was also divided into 5 systems. Each system describes a part of its history. It is impossible to put it back together without a key, Zakharov's table. But the final blow to the truth was dealt not by the military and not by politicians. It was dealt by scientists. The year 1903. Rome, the World Congress of Historians. Officially, exchange of scientific achievements, presentation of new research, discussions on methodology. In reality, the establishment of a single version of history for all humanity. Delegations from all leading powers, representatives of universities, academies of sciences, royal societies. Thick volumes with standardized chronological tables lie on the tables. Dates of key events from the creation of the world to the present. Everything is verified, agreed upon, signed. This was not a scientific dispute. It was the seal on the grave of truth. Birth dates of empires that never existed were established. Reigns of kings who did not exist were recorded. A system of scientific dating was created based on forged documents and rewritten chronicles. The result is simple and terrible. Everything that contradicts the established tables is declared pseudoscience. A scientist who dares to doubt the official chronology loses their career. A student who asks inconvenient questions does not receive a diploma. A writer who publishes an alternative version ends up on the list of marginalized individuals. An international scientific community is being created. Scientists who have doubts are being pushed out. Textbooks are rewritten according to a single template. Only the approved version is taught at universities. Criticism means the end of a career. From 1903 to 1950, history continues to be refined. New artifacts are found. Many are forgeries. Dates are clarified, adjusted to fit the system. A scientific basis for the forgery is created. By 1950, the system is completed. What was hidden? The fact of the existence of 5 calendar systems, the real dates of the catastrophe, the connection between different historical periods, the duplication of events in different centuries, the existence of a single world empire. The technology is simple. They take a document from the year 1650 according to the old Dutch system. They convert it to the modern one. 1650 plus 100 equals 1750. Now it is a different event, a different era. 1 century turns into 3. History is artificially lengthened. Why? To fill the void after the destruction of Tartaria, to create the antiquity of Europe, Rome, Greece, to justify the right to territories, to hide the fact of a recent catastrophe, to erase the memory of a highly developed civilization. Why did the calendar become the main weapon in this war for the past? Because time is not just an abstract quantity. Time is the foundation of human memory. A calendar is not a way to count the days until payday or a birthday. A calendar is a tool for managing the collective memory of entire peoples. How does human memory work? We remember events by attaching them to dates. My grandmother was born in 1920. The war began in 1914. The revolution happened in 1917. Dates are anchors on which all our memory of the past rests. Remove the anchors, and memory will collapse. What happens when the calendar system changes? Old dates instantly become incorrect. Grandpa's entry in the diary: met her on the 7th day of the I-600 first year. What does that mean? What year is that in our terms? It's unclear. It needs to be recalculated, converted, and here, the magic of substitution begins. During the recalculation process, anything can be changed. The event is recorded as the battle took place in I-612 according to the old system. We officially recalculate, add 1,000 years. It becomes 1,612. The battle happened at the beginning of the 17th century, but it can be counted differently. Add not 1,000, but 1,200. It will be 1,812. The beginning of the 19th century. A difference of 200 years. And now you have not one battle, but two. Both historically documented. Both studied in universities. Both included in textbooks. When the calendar changes, the connection between generations is broken. Imagine, your grandfather recorded events all his life according to one system. You received his diary. You open it. You see dates that do not exist in your reality. And 573. What is this? When is this? No one explains. The old system is forgotten. There are no conversion tables. Grandfather's memory faded along with his calendar. A void has arisen between you and your grandfather, a temporary chasm. And this void is filled by power. It comes with ready-made textbooks, with approved dates, with the correct history. You are told how it really was, which events are important, which are not, what to remember, what to forget. The multiplicity of calendar systems equals the fragmentation of a common memory. 5 calendars, 5 versions of the past. The French remember theirs, the Germans theirs, the Russians a third, the English a fourth, the Dutch a fifth. Each nation is confident that its version is correct. Each relies on its own documents, its own dates, its own ancestors. It is practically impossible to assemble a unified picture of the real past from these fragments. A coordinate system is needed that shows how the dates of different calendars relate to each other. The Zakharov table is exactly such a system, but its knowledge is suppressed, ridiculed, and ignored by academic science. Tartary is breaking apart not only on the land, but also in time. It has been fragmented chronologically, just as it was fragmented territorially. The erasure technology consists of 5 stages. The first, catastrophe, flood, epidemic, kills the carriers of memory. The second, change of calendar, breaks the dating. The third, rewriting documents, substitutes facts. The fourth, creation of science, institutionalizes lies. The fifth, education, drives lies into children. In 3 to 4 generations, any memory can be erased. 100 years, from 1800 to 1900. That is exactly how long it took. From the fall of Tartary to complete oblivion. Why do we not remember? Our great-grandfathers lived by a different calendar. Their documents are translated, forged. Their memory did not pass on because the counting system changed. We look at their dates and do not understand what it is about. Between us and them is a calendar abyss. Old New Year is not a charming tradition. It is a consequence of the calendar war. 13 days, the boundary between truth and falsehood. Days erased from history. Every time we celebrate it, we remember, without realizing, a time when humanity had a different past. There were not 2 calendars, but at least 5. Some events are recorded in textbooks 3 times under different dates. Napoleon created a unified coordinate system for the New World. Britain stole his idea and created the modern chronology. The year 1903 is the year when the truth was officially suppressed. Tartary disappeared, not only physically, but also from time. The calendar is not a neutral tool. It is a weapon of control over memory. Whoever controls the calendar controls history. Whoever controls history controls the present and the future. We live by a calendar created in 1900. Everything before that is suspicious. All dates before 1900 are questionable. Perhaps our 1,000-year history is 200 or 300 years of real events, stretched out, duplicated, rewritten. Tartaria was a real global civilization. It was destroyed at the end of the 18th, beginning of the 19th century. It was erased twice, physically and chronologically. First, the cities were destroyed. Then its time was divided into 5 systems. Each system describes a piece, but not the whole. It can only be put back together through Zakharov's table, but this knowledge is suppressed. If the calendar is a lie, what else in history is a forgery? How many ancient empires are actually the same period? Was ancient Rome part of Tartary? Did the Middle Ages even exist? Or is it recent history stretched into the past? Every time you look at the calendar, remember, these numbers are not chosen by chance. It is a tool of control. The true past is hidden behind these numbers, and until we reconsider time, we will not understand who we are. 13 days between the old and the new year is not a calculation error. These are 13 days of truth that were stolen from us. Every year we celebrate them without understanding the true meaning. It is a day of remembrance, remembrance of the world that was hidden from us, of the civilization that was erased twice, from maps and from chronology. Enter any old building in your city. Look at the doors that are 5 to 6 meters high, at the windows that you cannot reach, at the stairs designed for different proportions. This was not built for us. It is the heritage of another world, a world that lived in its own time, and that time was taken away from it. Every time you look at the calendar, remember, these numbers are not a given of nature. This is the choice of power. In the year 1903 in Rome, a small group of people decided how to count time for all humanity. They established the dates. They blocked questions. They declared doubts heresy. 120 years have passed since then. But the system works. Children learn in school. Ancient Rome 2,000 years ago. The Middle Ages 1,000 years ago. The modern era 500 years ago. Numbers hammered into memory. No one asks, where do these dates come from? Who calculated them? According to which documents? And most importantly, according to which calendar are the documents themselves dated? Time is not a river flowing in one direction. Time is a construct, created by people to control other people. It can be taken apart, removed layer by layer. Remove the year 1903, the official chronology will collapse. Remove Napoleon's reform, the letter I and the old French system will emerge. Rewind to the 17th century. The outline of Tartary will appear, still intact, living in its own unified time. Beneath all these layers lies another reality, a reality where there were no millennia of dark ages, where civilization did not fall and rise in waves, where a single highly developed culture existed, and it was destroyed not in ancient times. It was destroyed yesterday, 200 years ago, within the memory of great-great-grandfathers, but their memory was stolen along with the calendar. Subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to click the bell so you don't miss new investigations. There are still many mysteries and discoveries ahead. We will continue to look for clues, ask uncomfortable questions, and explore what official science avoids, because the truth is always nearby. You just have to want to see it.